Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Koti Vaishnavadhan ki jai, Rantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, all glories to the assembled all glories to the assembled all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Govardhan. Hare Krishna. So thank you all very much for coming. We're trying to have a few, educational programs or seminars at the neighborhood center in the spirit of educating each other in the finer aspects of Krishna consciousness. This is for those who are a little bit more serious about wanting to know more and developing our Krishna consciousness a bit further than the broader concepts. And the topic is called the Regulative Principles of Freedom, where we're going to discuss I'm thinking 3 weeks, it may be 2. So we'll have to see how fast we go or how slow we go. These regulative principles of freedom, which form very important framework and basis for executing sadhana bhakti, the principles of bhakti. There are 4 regulative principles that all of us who are either initiated or aspire to be initiated, we take a vow. We make a vow in front of the spiritual master and the deities of Krishna and the entire parampara to follow these 4 principles carefully. So they are no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling. And this one, everyone has to take this vow. And some people choose to follow these 4 principles exactly the way it is, avowed. No meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling, meaning just the external aspects of it. Actually, these 4 principles mean a lot more once you get into knowing them more deeply. So we'll try to attempt to go beyond the externalities, beyond just the outer regions of what this means. And we'll try to get into a little bit more in terms of how to live our life on a daily basis with these 4 principles. Think of them as guiding principles for the rest of our Krishna conscious life as we move towards, or if we have already made serious commitments of following these principles. And to know them properly is important. Because if we don't know what we are following, then what are we following? So it's not possible that in the next, this is 2 hours today, another 4 max, so in a total of 6 hours to be able to speak about these in full detail. It may not be possible, but we should try to get them to a decent level of detail discussion. I will also speak about these 4 principles in context to a grahasta life, because most of us here are grahastas, not all. Some way or the other are grahastas in preparation, or grahastas in practice, or grahastas in aspiration. So the idea is to know this because grahastas form a very important piece of the Hare Krishna movement. When the Hare Krishna movement started, it was primarily a temple-based, brahmachari-based movement. That's what Prabhupada did. Very, very quickly made brahmacharis and very quickly gave them sannyas. He also had grahastas, not that there were no grahastas, but the primary membership, if you will, was the brahmacharis. Young men, young women. Prabhupada even coined the term brahmacharini, ashram, or brahmacharini. Such a term doesn't exist in the Vedas. Doesn't exist. But it was formed because Prabhupada had a particular vision to get young men and women very inspired in Krishna consciousness and to live a very high degree of surrender and renunciation. Mostly spend all their energy in preaching. And Prabhupada had envisioned that over time, from a temple-centric community or from a temple-centric movement, the Hare Krishna movement will become a household-centric movement. Many congregational members, grahastas will join, and each house will potentially become a temple. So we should know, as grahastas who have a job, who interact with the outside world, how to manage these principles. Another reason to know these principles and follow them properly is, think of it as Krishna consciousness as a experiment in a lab. And we know that for proper reading outcomes of our experiment, we want to control the variables carefully, environmental variables. Because if you don't control environmental variables, your experimental readings don't come out properly. True? So, because our instruments are supposedly sensitive. A sensitive instrument means for a little change in input, there is a fairly big change in output. That's called sensitivity. So we are conducting Krishna consciousness such that our consciousness is very sensitive. For a little shift in input, a little material desire, there's a big change in our activity. So we may think, oh, it's a small deviation only. So what if I ate an omelette? Sometimes people argue egg is vegetarian, for example. Egg is not meat. That's a stronger argument, not that it's vegetarian. Egg is not meat. But a slight change in our consciousness, small deviation, actually manifests as a larger deviation in our overall output of Krishna consciousness, or how our consciousness gets deviated from Krishna. So these four principles are important because these are the environmental variables. To control them is essential as a practicing devotee. Now, the whole of Krishna consciousness is not just the four regulative principles. If someone follows the four regulative principles perfectly well, it's not that he becomes or she becomes a perfect devotee. There are many persons who are vegetarians, who are celibate, who don't engage in any intoxication, and definitely no gambling. But it's not necessary that they are devotees of Krishna. What makes a person a devotee of Krishna is the chanting of Krishna's holy name. To be able to chant Krishna's name without disturbance in the mind, these four principles form the essential foundation for helping our consciousness be relatively stable. Like to build a house, you need a foundation. No house can be built without a foundation. But you cannot live just because you have a foundation and no house. Right? So foundation is necessary. These are foundational principles. So with that, over the next, 3 weeks maybe, if Srila Prabhupada gives me 3 weeks, we'll do 3 weeks. If he says stay within 2, we'll have to make it within 2. So we'll see. Your input to him, even if you don't like the seminar, just say very nice, so we'll get an extra week. If you like, we'll capture on video. Avilo has a video. We'll capture video testimonials and show it to Subal. Just say very nice. We'll get an extra week. In general, because the discussion can become fairly involved, I have a small request. If you have this little toy called cell phone, you might want to turn it off and not pick any calls for the next 2 hours maybe. I know it's very tough. To not respond to a call for the next 2 hours is like the most difficult thing. Maybe first principle we can start with is austerity. So we'll try not to pick up our phone as much as we can. Please don't. And also not to have any personal little discussions. Okay. And we'll try to leave ample time for question and answers, we'll see. So what I thought we'll do, to set the stage, if you will, discuss a little about Kali Yuga, because we are not only in Kali Yuga, we are also the very special products of Kali Yuga. We're victims, products, and proponents of Kali Yuga. So we'll discuss what Kali Yuga looks like, and take it from there. So, right? Now, this presentation was from a college presentation. Just historically, this was the very first presentation I ever made in my whole, life. This was the very first one I made at a university setting, IIT. First time ever in 2002. September, October 2002. I had met the devotees and my spiritual master only in 2001. So I was a brand new bhakta, still am. But I was a brand new bhakta and I didn't know what I was talking about. One thing has changed, that from 2002, we are now almost in 2013. I have learnt the language. I still don't know what I'm talking about. We'll go with the slides. The only thing that has changed is we have upgraded all the graphics, and this thanks to Abhinav, who's done a bunch of work here. So if you like the slides, you thank him. If you don't like anything, you thank me. Okay, it was called Horrors of the Iron Age. We'll see how it goes. We are into Kali Yuga, 5,114 years, 8 months, and 8 days. This is updated as of today? Okay, this is 9 months and 30 days. That will be taking 10 months, right? Something approximately. Because we generally have the habit of saying 5,000 years ago. When did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appear? 500 years ago. As in 500 never changed. 5,000 when Kali Yuga started, 500 when Lord Chaitanya came. 5,100 years, 114 years. And as of a few days ago, the world was supposed to come to an end. Nothing happened. We have actually 426, 885 years to go. So you better get used to liking Kali Yuga. Things are going to change for the worse, no doubt. But Kali Yuga is not ending. It's a long time. This is for the devotees. Get an alarm clock. This is just a reminder to wake up for Mangalarti. This is to indicate the time is cyclical. That means there are two characteristics to time. Characteristics of time. One is time is linear. It progresses forward, but it is cyclical. Cyclical because everything repeats. We start with the early morning, mid-morning, afternoon, or midday, afternoon, etc. And then we evening, night, morning again. And the days get into weeks. Sunday comes back, Monday comes back. At work, there's a way you know which day of the week it is, even if you don't look at your calendar. When you're entering the office, when everyone is like that, really not too excited, you know it's a Monday. Very good. And when everyone's fairly excited to get out of the building, you know it's a Friday. How are you this morning? Oh, it's Monday. That's the answer. How are you today? I'm excited, it's Friday. So it's cyclical. Then weeks transform to months. In the Roman calendar, we have January through December, and then January comes again. Months roll into seasons. Seasons roll into years. Years roll into, according to Vedic calendar, we say decades, but time moves forward, but it is cyclical. Things repeat again and again. So karma, our karma, also fructifies as we progress in time. But generally we tend to do the same set of activities. Some slides I will talk about, some slides I'm just going to skip from a context perspective. I mean, this is an elephant and this is a donkey. Things change. This guy, Saddam Hussein, dead on arrival. He didn't become like that.
It's the new richest person.
Oh, he's the new richest person. So what's important to know is that our consciousness is influenced by time. Things that we are inspired to do in the morning, things that we are inspired to do during the day, and things that we are inspired to do at night. Our consciousness is influenced by time. Therefore, we are encouraged to chant in the morning, work during the day, and sleep at night, unless you're a college student. Then everything shifts, right? Sleep during the day, work at night, and don't chant at all. But the reason this is important is if our activities are in harmony with time, then we get maximum benefit. If our activities are not in harmony with time, then we might get the benefit, but the amount of work we have to put in to train our consciousness is horrendous. Like, how many of us have chanted japa at night? Come on, don't be shy. And how many of us, we all know, we have chanted in the morning. You know the difference. You know the difference when we chant japa at night. We chant not the 32 syllable mantra, at night it is something. Maybe 64 syllables, sometimes only 10, varies the mantras. Early morning chanting is very important because when our activities are in harmony with time, we get the maximum benefit. Therefore, we are on a very broad scale, astronomical Vedic calendar scale, we are in Kali Yuga. It's like chanting at night, midnight. Had we been in Satya Yuga, it would have been a different experience, or Treta, Dvapara. But we are in Kali Yuga. What to do? So we have to do activities that are in harmony with what is prescribed for Kali Yuga. We'll come to that. So the Vedic understanding of time is that there are 4 yugas or periods called Satya Yuga, which is called the golden period, Treta, which is the silver, Dvapara, which is the bronze, and Kali is the Iron Age. Now we are in a very special Yuga cycle. This is the 28th Yuga cycle. In the which Manu? The 7th Manu. In one day of Brahma. In such a particular permutation or combination of day in Brahma's life, each day there is one Yuga cycle where Dvapara and Treta exchange. Actual progression is Satya, Dvapara, Treta and Kali. In this particular cycle that we are very fortunately part of, in one sense, the Treta and Dvapara shift. Don't ask me why. That is how they shifted. It's like having a winter that's really not that cold yet. We don't know why. So the base unit of time calculation is Kali, 432,000 years. The previous Yuga called dvapara is twice Kali Yuga, 864. Treta Yuga is thrice Kali Yuga, 1.26 million years. And Satya Yuga is 4 times Kali Yuga, so 1.76 million years. So think of it, everything as 432,000 times 2, 3 and 4. Together, they were called one Yuga cycle. And in one day of Brahma, there are 1,000 such Yuga cycles, totaling 4,320,000,000 years, approximately, because in between there is what is called sandhya or transitions from one Yuga to another, but approximately 4,320,000,000 years of a 12-hour period of Brahma. There is a similar 12-hour period which is called night of Brahma. Okay? So that's one 24-hour period of Brahma's life. Brahma lives for 100 such years, which is approximately 311 trillion years on earthly time calculations. Okay? There is a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 12th canto, where Shukadeva Goswami describes to Maharaj Parikshit the advent of Kali Yuga. What Kali Yuga will be like. And he says, Tatascha anudinam rajan, Dharma, satyam saucam ksama daya, kalena balina rajan, nankshati ayu balam smriti. Tatascha anudina dharma. Anudinam means day by day. By the time Kali Yuga comes, day by day, nankshati. Nankshati means degrades, or there is degradation of dharma. Here we say morality. Satyam, shaucham, ksama daya. Satyam, truthfulness. Shaucham, cleanliness. Ksama, tolerance. Daya, mercy. And kalena balina, by the influence of time, nankshati ayu, one's lifespan decreases, one's strength decreases, and one's memory decreases. This is what happens in Kali Yuga, and we are products of Kali Yuga. So what is it like in Kali Yuga? We're going to glorify the great inhabitants of Kali Yuga. Well, first of all, no Leela Prabhu and Mataji and the little guy are back. Anyway, the heads were turning. I thought I was just. So this is a verse from the first canto, first chapter, verses 10. This verse 10. It says, Prayen alpaisha sabhya kalavasmin yugejana mandara sumandamata mandabhagya hipadruta. The people in Kali Yuga have these characteristics. First of all, they are mandara. Mandara means lazy. Now, people in Kali Yuga are lazy, not physically or when you look at people, they really work very hard. They wake up early in the morning, they have to commute long distances, and work hours. If you were working in the state government in India, then you could say, oh, Manda, because nothing happens in state government. Apparently, if you don't know, they come to office at 10 o'clock. The government office starts at 9. Let's say 9. They come at 10.
Nobody knows the official hour.
That is correct. That is why. That's state government. They start at 10. At 10:30, if you go to meet the government officer, he or she is not at their desk because they are at a tea break. So you come back at 12 and they are not there because they've gone for a lunch break. When are you supposed to? We ask them, "Saat kabhi aayenge? When will this sir come back?" They will say, 2 baje ke baad. No, after 2 o'clock. Between 12 and 2 is lunch and siesta. When you come back at 2, they will say, "Saab abhi aaye nahi, not yet come." You come back at 3, they will say, "Meeting mein hai." He's in a meeting. You come back at 3:30 and he'll say, "Ghar chale gaye." He's gone home for the day. So things don't move. That is manda life. But if you see in other places, people are working very hard. 12-hour working days, long commutes, etc. Yet, this is manda, lazy from a spiritual perspective. People are not inspired to cultivate spirituality. They're very inspired to enhance their sense gratification. So it's called manda. And sumanda mate. In Sanskrit, whenever there is a prefix su, it means very or extra. So manda mata means not really intelligent, but dull-headed. So dull-headed, sumanda matayo, because in Kali Yuga people don't consider, why am I suffering? Or they don't take up solutions that can really solve all the suffering. They use their what's called petty intelligence in coming up with solutions that is said that actually increases their problems. The solutions they come up with are bigger problems than the original problems they were trying to solve. This is Prahlad Maharaj saying that Dukkhaushadam tad api dukkham. The solutions we come up with are more problematic than the original problem. For example, there is a dearth of resources on this planet. It doesn't take a very intelligent person to figure that out. Yet, the solutions that people apply is so much more detrimental, and it causes a whole different problem. Sometimes it's described, there was a need for transportation. So the human intelligence designed and developed the automobile. And soon, all countries, there are so many cars. And what is the number one problem because of automobiles? Air pollution and severe demand for gas. And our whole economy is based on gas reserves. And every time a barrel of crude oil becomes more expensive, our gas prices also go up. And our whole economy, how much are we paying for gas now? Close to $4. Terrible. So our problems have increased, and to pay for higher gas prices, people's cars have also become bigger. Pay for gas prices. We have to work harder. To work harder, we have to have more money to save. Whole thing. And this is just to pay for high gas demand, like that. So it is described that the solutions we come up with to solve one problem creates more problems than the original problem itself. This is Sumandamati. Actual problem is, or actual solution is, as they say, abstinence, which we're going to discuss more. But no, how can you stop consumerism? My gosh. That is why they said that devotees are the worst for the economy. Because devotees don't buy unnecessary stuff. And the whole economy is meant to encourage you to buy stuff. Buy this, buy that, doorbusters. You're not supposed to. Anyway, manda sumanda mateo, manda bhagya. Manda bhagya means unfortunate. that even after trying so many solutions, somehow things don't work out. This is called Mandalagya. We are unfortunate. Something or the other goes wrong. And as a consequence, one is upadvapara, always disturbed. Anyone noticed that people in Kali Yuga are disturbed? Anyone noticed? Have you seen people's faces on the roads when you go out? If you go out for Harinam and book distribution, you will see. Of course, we all go out even otherwise during the day. Notice people's faces. Disturbed. So disturbed. In fact, take a picture, if for many of us, take a picture before we became devotees. Go look at those pictures. And look at our pictures after we become devotees. If there is no change, something's wrong in our japa. If you want to know, am I chanting already? Look at before and after pictures. The general there's a change. Even with little chanting Hare Krishna, the face becomes clearer. I mean, this is not we don't chant Hare Krishna mantra as part of a beauty formula. What is the secret of your glowing face? Hare Krishna Mahamudra. That would be a good advertisement. But in general, it is said that the face is the index of the mind. So when mind is disturbed, it shows on the face. Lines on the forehead, the brows, always disturbed. Another way is the eyes don't focus. They are called spaced out. There are many people, you see on train or walking on the street, it's spaced. That's because the mind is disturbed. Many times, if any one of us has had the time sitting with us, any of our spiritual masters or devotees, the moment we sit, they can tell, what's bothering you? Oh, I didn't even say anything. Well, you don't have to say, it's written all over your face. Because the face is the index of the mind. So, upadvapara, people are disturbed, constantly disturbed. Disturbed because they don't know, they can't figure out how to solve their problems. And it is said that most disturbance in life comes from sense gratification. Sense gratification causes the most disturbance in one's life. I'm saying this because our seminar is connected to how we want to become free of these problems. So they are called the regulative principles of freedom. So one might say it's a little paradoxical. What do you mean regulative principles and then you're talking freedom? So we'll discuss that. What is this picture meant to be?
Guided missiles by misguided people.
Oh. So we discussed Dharma. Okay, so what does Dharma mean? It means following the codes of conduct given by God. This is in Srimad Bhagavatam, in Yamaraj's discussion with the Remedies. He describes the real meaning of Dharma means a set of codes of conduct given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is Dharma. To live according to those was called a dharmic life. Dharma tu sakshat bhagavat pranita. So these four pillars of religiosity are cleanliness, mercy, truthfulness, and tolerance or austerity. And when we make these vows of no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex, they are meant to sustain or nourish each of these pillars. So it is described that cleanliness upholds or is upheld by no illicit sex. mercy is upheld by no meat eating. Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava Radha. Truthfulness is upheld by no gambling, and tolerance or austerity is upheld by no intoxication. A small request. Can the crowd move to its right a bit? Just Mataji. And this, there is open space here. Please come sit this. Yes. Thank you. So when we maintain, when we nourish these pillars, then we can lead a dharmic life. In the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Maharaj Yudhishthira approaches Bhishma Deva, who is lying down on a bed of arrows, Yudhishthira Maharaj is very morose. He's feeling very sad. His sadness is that his entire family got killed. On both sides they got killed because somehow he had this urge to be the king. And he laments that it is because of him that there was so much murder and mayhem and killing. So Bhishma Deva consoles him that you shouldn't think that you're responsible for this. This happened because of the will of providence, Krishna's will. And as far as you, Yudhishthira, you've always lived a perfect life. And he gives a principle. In general, sometimes we think, have I done the right thing? Right? We consider, have I done the right thing by saying this or doing, have I done the right thing? He gives 3 principles by which to live our lives so that we can always be clear what we have done is right. And it's called Vipra Dharma Achyuta Ashraya. Vipra, first of all, Dharma means that we have lived or acted according to the principles of Dharma. Vipra indicates that those principles that we have followed is under the guidance of elevated brahmanas. And the Achyuta indicates that we have done it for pleasing Krishna. If these 3 are in place, then we can be assured or guaranteed that we have done the right thing. We have done it the right way. Vipra, Dharma, Achyuta, Ashraya. So without living a religious life, without following the codes of Dharma, we cannot expect to feel happy. We cannot expect to be not disturbed. We cannot expect our intelligence to be awakened. So we follow these principles. They're very important. In fact, it is described that one who follows these principles is qualified to be called a human being. When we are born from our parents, the biological birth, that biological birth brings us into the human species. It is the following of the regulative principles and guidance by Guru that actually makes us a human being. There's a difference in being in the human species and actually being a human being. Generally, a human being is called Manishi. Manishi means thoughtful. And a person cannot be thoughtful, his mind will not have the room to consider higher things in life if these pillars are not in place. Without these pillars, the mind is always disturbed. Upadrita. Because Kali Yuga people are disturbed because in their life they are not clean, they don't have any mercy, they're not tolerant of anything, and if anything there is some truthfulness left. Not completely, but just a little. When we come to truthfulness in our seminar, you will see what a fantastic quality this is, and it has so many layers of understanding what is truthfulness. Generally, when we say truthfulness, give a synonym, most likely we'll come up with honesty. But there are so many degrees of truthfulness. It's an astounding quality. And we'll talk about this. And if these are not there, then the mind is disturbed. Satyam. We'll come to details of satyam. This is just high level. Our Vedic aphorisms, they urge us asatoma satgamaya, tamasima jyotirgamaya. Wherever in Sanskrit this word ma shows up, it means do not. It's a prohibition, not. So the urge is asatoma. Do not go towards asat. Asat means anything that is temporary. Don't pursue it. Sadgamaya. Follow that which is eternal. Tamasima. Don't follow that which is in the mode of darkness. Jyotirgamaya. Move towards enlightenment. Don't do things that will take you into darkness even further. Knowingly or unknowingly, don't do it. Move towards enlightenment. One who lives like that is called truthful. One who is cultivating the quality of truthfulness. This truth is with a capital T, the absolute truth. So there are examples of dishonest behavior. Satyam computers, they cook their books. Same with Enron. And a disaster. Who's this guy?
Rod Blagojevich.
Oh,
Gabbard.
Oh yeah, of course. We went away so far in the saucam, cleanliness. Cleanliness, both external cleanliness and internal cleanliness. So it says, manaha trayate iti mantra, that which cleans the mind, that which releases the mind from its impurities, is called mantra. So when we talk of cleanliness, both internal and external is next to godliness, because God or Krishna is always pure, clean. So living a clean life, both internally and externally, is very important to have a undisturbed mind. Ksama, or tolerance or austerity. And it says, forgive and you shall be forgiven. So cultivating this living life according to these principles, trinadapi sunichena, tarorava sahishnuna, amanina manadena, kirtaniya sadhana. These four principles in this verse, they help us cultivate a very special quality, a very pure mind. First of all, it is trinadapi sunichena, more humble than the straw on the street. Sometimes it's described as not grass, straw on the street. Dinabandhu describes grass that is green. If you step on it, when you are stepping on it, it is flat on the floor, very humble. The moment you take your foot off, its humility goes away. So circumstantial humility, that's for the grass. But a straw is always, because dry, it's always flat on the floor, whether you step on it or not. So humility, that's not circumstantial, it's part of our character. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, more humbler than a strong tree. So we have to go beyond that. Then more tolerant than a tree. The tree is very tolerant. Stands in the cold, standing all the time. We get tired, we have to sit down, we're standing. In the cold, all the leaves drop. People come for different things from the tree and pluck. And the tree doesn't make distinction. You're a saint and you're a cook. Nothing like that. Gives fruit, shade, leaves, freely. In fact, it says the tree does not protest when it is being cut down. Not only does it not protest, it actually gives you the wood for making the axe by which you can cut it down. So we're not going to discuss what does that really mean. That is such a giving nature. That's a tree. More tolerant than a tree. And Amani, not looking for any respect. This is tough. Manadena, always giving others respect. Generally, we respect those who respect us. And if someone doesn't respect us, then so to respect those who don't even respect us, that's the call by Lord Chaitanya. Please do so we can chant. And daya, or mercy, says respecting life, not just ours. The essential principles is live and let live. Respecting life, respecting others' right to live. And the shloka that gives that higher context is Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam. Everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of God. This is from Sri Ishopanishad. This is the first mantra of Ishopanishad. I don't know what this nice picture is for.
This is Hong Kong.
I know this is Hong Kong.
This is the next slide. This is also Hong Kong.
This is also Hong Kong. So the buildings on the outside look very nice, and inside this is how the apartments look. No, they don't. I don't know what it's like.
They put old people in cages and charge a lot of money for it.
Oh, that's what they do?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
They say that, Abel was saying that they put the senior citizens in small cages like this and charge a lot of money. Okay, in Kali Yuga, this is the situation. The pillars have been broken. Cleanliness, mercy, tolerance, and truthfulness has become very weak. It is said that it is only because truthfulness is still alive to some degree that people are still interested in something in terms of spirituality. And as Kali Yuga progresses, even that pillar is going to fall. Why do we need to know all this? So it says, just as we prepare for any situation, for example, it's very cold outside. So to face the cold, we prepare ourselves. We wear our thermals, our jackets, coats, hats, gloves, earmuffs, whatever we wear to protect ourselves from the cold. Like that, because we are in Kali Yuga, we need to prepare ourselves so we can move through Kali Yuga. There you go. If you have a headache, take a medicine. So how do we combat the influence of Kali Yuga? In this age of convenience, the remedy for Kali Yuga should also be easy, yet most sublime. So this is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Krite yadhyaito Vishnu, tetayam yajato makhai, dvapare paricharyayam, kalavtat hari kirtanat. So whatever result one may have obtained in Satya Yuga by the process of Dhyayato Vishnu, meditation on Vishnu, In Treta, they achieved that by performance of yajna. In dvapara, by deity worship or worship in the temple. In Kali Yuga, none of these three can be done. Nobody can sit in meditation for more than 3 minutes. 3 minutes will be really good. After that, they either fall asleep or the back, knee, hip, they start paining. So you need a brick. Where's that brick? Our temple is full of the yoga bricks. This is the devotee's favorite. You can't sit on the floor. So they all have this little brick that helps keep the knees below the hip. Kali Yuga meditation. We cannot perform fire yajnas. I have done quite a few fire yajnas, and you can't light that fire. You have to put so much camphor in it just as insurance, just in case. Because the brahmanas are supposed to be so pure, and they have this arani wood, especially for sacrifice. It's also called shamit. Shamit pani, shotri and brahmanishta. Shamit is the special wood, dry wood of a particular tree, the shamit tree. And once you put in the pit, just by reciting Agnave, it should light on its own. Here we have lighter and the big ones, dry stick, camphor. Still we're never sure what will happen. We cannot perform this kind of Vedic sacrifice. We don't know ghee. We may think it is ghee. It may turn out to be pig fat. There was a big case in India. They had bottled everywhere ghee of different brands, and they found out that it's really not ghee. It is fat from stray dogs, fat from pigs, fat from all sorts of animals. Oh, really? It was a big case. And then just last year. But it's all marketed as ghee. How do we know what is real taste of real ghee? Does anyone know? No. If it looks yellow, there's a picture of a cow on it. It's a ghee, not ghee. We don't know what fat we're eating. Right? We don't know. So we cannot perform yajnas like that. And we cannot perform elaborate deity worship. Because one is the deity is supposed to be offered gold jewelry, diamonds, rubies. We cannot afford. And even if they can afford, the max they can do is put around their own necks. Forget about giving it to Krishna. They come to the temple with their diamond. They come for darshan and come to you like my diamond necklace? Thank you for giving it to me. We can't afford it. Elaborate deity worship, pure ingredients. Where do we get? Even milk has this oil, fish oil, everything is either genetically modified or something. It is not pure. So it is said that in Kali Yuga, tad Hari Kirtana, Kalau tad Hari Kirtana. All of that the great sages did in the other yugas, we can also get the same benefit from Hari Kirtana, from chanting Krishna's name, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So this is one of the most important verses that forms the basis for discussing the 4 regulative principles. Because you will understand as we go through the next couple of weeks, it's a fairly morbid presentation. Everything is bad, Kali Yuga is disturbance, people are lazy, mind is not working. You will go out of the room thinking, whoa, I have no hope. So this is the hope. Kaler dosha nidhe rajan. Shukadeva Goswami is telling Parikshit Maharaj, no doubt that Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. Dosha means fault or mistake or contamination, discrepancy. Nidhi means ocean. We are living in an ocean of faults. Whatever we do, we may have the best of intentions, but definitely there will be some discrepancy. Asti eko mahan guna. But there is only one great quality in Kali Yuga. Kirtanadeva Krishnasya. Just by chanting Krishna's name, Hare Krishna mantra, Mukta Sangha Param Vraja. One is immediately relieved of all of one's attachments to the modes of nature. And Param Vraja, one goes to the eternal, absolute, transcendental state of existence, the transcendental kingdom. We're trying to get someone's attention. So, we want to maximize our benefit of having received the opportunity to chant Hare Krishna. That's what we want to maximize. Which means we want to be able to chant our japa or kirtan without disturbance. Without disturbance in our mind. For which the following of these four principles is very important. It's helpful. By not following the regulative principles, if one tries to chant Hare Krishna, the benefit is not the fullest. You get something, but not the full benefit. And we want the full benefit. There's a famous verse from Brihad Naradiya Purana. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam. Our young audience member here. How old are you? 6. You know this verse? Can you say it for us, please? Thank you very much. And it says that the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is 16 words or names after searching through all of the Vedic literature. Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate Natav Parataropaya. We haven't found a better solution after searching through the entire Vedic literature. We haven't found a better solution for counteracting the influence of Kali than this 16 named mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Iti Shodashakam Namnam, Kali Kalmashanasham, Natav Parataropaya, Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. Okay, can you hit the B button for me? Thank you. So that's the context of Kali Yuga. Generally, when we say, let me see if there are any questions, and then we'll go to the next phase. Any questions? Comments? Yes.
Well, it brings up to mind so many things, and we can talk about it, but I'd love to get your feedback on, things like tolerance. So should we be tolerant of things that are uncleanliness, or, unclean?
No. Krishna.
But then that wouldn't be practicing tolerance. And I'll give you an example.
No, I understand.
The example would be of people with different sexual orientation. Should we just tolerate and move on, or things like that?
I'll say one sentence answer, and then as we go through each of these pillars over the next, couple of weeks, we'll get into more of it. Generally, intolerance comes from the fact that some conception that we have of what is right doesn't fit with what's out there. And that mismatch is called intolerance. Well, not mismatch. Acting out that mismatch is called intolerance. So it's described that to cultivate tolerance, one has to develop a spiritual conception. Meaning, it's not that heterosexual is better than homosexual or gay or whatever the different sexual orientations are. All spiritual beings, part and parcels of Krishna. And as we develop a spiritual vision or perspective, we automatically become more tolerant of what we think are others' shortcomings. Whether they are or not, it's mostly perception of things. So, sexual orientation is quite, let's say, a topic that's there. But what about other things? In relationships, in a day-to-day life, how do we tolerate each other's perceived deficiencies? How do we work with them? Unless we have a spiritual vision of ourselves and others, we cannot be tolerant. Because in the absence of a spiritual vision, we'll have a very material vision. Material vision means I group things by material yardsticks or criteria. Such people are good, such people are bad. This is okay for me, this is not okay for me. But that's not how life should operate, especially transcendental life. So the answer is to cultivate a spiritual vision of ourselves and others. Then tolerance comes as a nature of it. As our spiritual nature is awakened, tolerance is a quality that's awakened. So that's just the highlight of the answer. We'll get into more detail. That's not
I'm just going to ask, so
Thank
the
you.
tolerance that we're talking about, isn't it?
Mic's not on, I think.
It is.
It is on? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so the tolerance that we're talking about here, I thought was related to our personal egos and our personal perceptions of others acting on us.
Correct. So when I said intolerance is acting out the discrepancy in our perception and what's out there. So our perception comes from our identity. For example, I came from an Indian background. Okay, when I think of myself as an Indian, and that's my identity, from that set of values, the Indian values, when I look at some things like, wow, what is that? When for someone else who's from that environment, may think it's perfectly okay. They don't see that discrepancy. It depends on my sense of identity. Case in point, I came to this country 16 years ago as a student. And in general, in India, when the teacher walks into the room, everyone stands as a matter of just respect or regard for the teacher. I came to the university, first day I sat, and others were sitting in class, professor came, and my classmates, I guess who studied here, came in with their Coke or bagels, and they were eating while the teacher was speaking. It took me a week to figure out that that's okay. It's like, how can you eat? This was classroom. Anyway, a week later, I was eating too. or sitting with their foot on the table when professors speak. Another one was calling the professor by their first name. It just didn't compute for me. Because I was thinking, I am Indian, I have these set of values. But that's not who I am. And I was intolerant of it. Likewise, others were intolerant of my being who I was. Like that. So that when you said ego, that's the sense of identity. So unless we begin or cultivate that our identity is that we are parts and parcels, little tiny servants of Krishna, and so are others, we will continue to remain intolerant of ourselves and others.
we talk about like 4 pillars of Dharma. I'm loud. We talk about 4 pillars of Dharma. So, which Dharma we are talking about? Is it like Hindu Dharma or ISKCON Dharma or overall Dharma? Because the other Dharma, like if you say Christianity or Islam, they might say that these are also their 4 principles, but it's not. They advocate meat eating, intoxication.
We're going to get into meat eating right now. I mean, no meat eating right now.
So intoxication is like one they consider. Okay. So then the Dharma, when we talk about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there has to be one Dharma, right? There cannot be Dharma for different
Correct. Because God is one. If there is one God, then all of God's instructions are also one or similar. So when we talk of religion, we're not talking about this religion, that religion, we're talking about the principles of religion. Principles of religion are independent of a particular expression of religion. Because a principle is a principle. For example, when you say truthfulness, does truthfulness for a Hindu be different from truthfulness for a Muslim? No, truthfulness is truthfulness because it's a principle. Like that. We're talking of principles of religion, or religious principles. Dharma means, in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada gives different meanings for the word dharma. Generally, when we say dharma, we think it's a kind of faith or a religion, particular religion. But we see that people can change their religion. A Hindu can become a Muslim. When a Hindu boy falls in love with a Muslim girl, he converts to Islam. What's the big deal? People change. So dharma means that's not the real meaning of dharma. So Prabhupada quotes Srila Ramanujacharya and accepts that as a proper meaning of the word dharma. Dharma means that which is intrinsic characteristic or intrinsic nature of something. That's called dharma. And he quotes that the dharma of sugar is sweetness. The dharma of water is liquidity. And then he says that the dharma of the living entity is service. We're all serving. And Prabhupada described we're serving the wife, we're serving the husband, we're serving the family, we're serving the country, we're serving our boss. Something. And Prabhupada says if nothing else, we serve a dog. Which is true. But we're serving. And it doesn't matter who won us, they're serving. And he gives a story. There's a person who came to meet the President of the United States. And his secretary said, please wait, he's very busy right now. Oh. He waited and waited, and the secretary went away. So he got a chance to peek through the keyhole. And he saw that the President was down on his fours, and his grandson was sitting on his back, and the President was acting like a pony. So wow, he's the master of the whole country and literally the whole world, but he's a servant of his grandson. So it doesn't matter who we are, we're all serving. Knowingly or unknowingly, but we are serving. So service is intrinsic to the soul. So dharma, what we're talking about, is that characteristic which is intrinsic, which are these 4 as well, but it allows us to be of service to Krishna. So we follow these 4. We're not talking about this religion, that religion. Now we'll talk, when we come to other principles, we have to understand the idea of disciplic succession. Without disciplic succession, a particular religion that's expressed, a religious idea that's expressed in a particular religion has no validity. For example, a Christian who doesn't follow in disciplic succession the principles of Christianity is not a Christian. He may say, I have faith in Jesus. And if you see Prabhupada, whenever he talked to people from the Christian faith, they never got into philosophy. The Prabhupada only stuck to one thing. Doesn't your religion say, thou shalt not kill? Yes. Why will you kill? No, that means thou shalt not murder. If that was thou shalt not murder, Jesus would have said thou shalt not murder. But it says thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing? Oh, animals don't have soul. We're getting into that. But that's the whole idea. So just because we profess a particular religion doesn't mean we are of that religion. We have to follow it properly. And we have to follow something that comes in disciplic succession. Otherwise, we'll be sincerely following the wrong thing. For that matter, so-called Hindus. My gosh, what all things Hindus do? You know of Hindus who eat meat? Of course. Only on the plane, if you say Hindu vegetarian, Hindu meal, you will get fish. Wow, when did that happen? So being Hindu is not, what does it mean? It means nothing. It has to be followed in proper disciplic succession. That's what we're talking about. We're talking independent of certain religious expressions of things. Any other question? Okay. Ms. Prabhupada, can you get my computer? So the first thing among the religious principles we will talk about is no meat eating, or the principle of mercy. Right here. Can you open it and get my computer? The word mercy has a connotation. It is expressing. Thank you. It is expressing another living entity's right to life. So when we say a devotee is merciful, or that one of the religious principles is mercy, then it's not that mercy is a quality that is exchanged only among humans, or is not a power invested only in certain government offices, that a person who is, punished or is headed for execution, the president shows mercy and excuses him of his crime. Mercy is something that each one of us has the ability to express. Mercy is expressed in the qualities of forgiveness, in the quality of giving others and ourselves another chance. Generally, we don't give each other another chance. But Krishna has given us so many another chances. So mercy is a very important quality. In fact, mercy actually shows strength of character. It allows us to become instruments of Krishna, the completely merciful personality of Godhead. Krishna is infinitely merciful. And when we express mercy with each other, or mercy to each other, then we are acting as those tiny instruments of God. And to be able to live a full life, a complete life, one should appreciate the value of life. We all appreciate the value of our own life. True? And because we do everything to nourish and preserve our own life. We eat well, we do things to preserve our lives, security, safety, insurance, everything is done for preservation of our lives. Another way of seeing this is when we don't respect life, we don't respect not only our own life but others' lives, then we tend to become what's called irresponsible. And living irresponsibly is no fun. Because irresponsible living brings with it a whole set of problems. Because irresponsible living, the consequences of which are so difficult to manage. Because karmically, a person who interacts with nature irresponsibly gets very severe reactions from nature. Like this whole idea of the green revolution. We are being asked to minimize our carbon footprint, for example, because the more use of things that emanate carbon is dangerous, because carbon depletes the ozone layer, transforms everything to carbon dioxide, and when ozone is depleted, it does not protect the Earth's atmosphere from the severe ultraviolet radiation from the sun, for example. So irresponsible behavior means doing something against one's own self-interest. This is called irresponsible living. Doing something against someone else's self-interest also is part of irresponsible living. The opposite of which, meaning doing something for benefiting someone else, is called responsible living. For example, as part of the green revolution, there's only one example. I live today responsibly so that the future generations can also live a comfortable life on planet Earth. Irresponsible people will say, I don't care. I'm having fun, and that's all that counts. If 5 generations later, there is no Earth planet or it's all messed up, why do I care? This is called irresponsible living. We cannot say, why do I care? Because we live in an environment where there is what's called interaction. We interact with nature, we interact with other living entities. And our living is highly determined by other living entities. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni gives a verse, Jivo Jivasya Jivanam. That one living entity depends on another living entity for his sustenance. For example, we rely on so many bacteria within us to help with our digestion, for example. We rely on the earthworms, we rely on the frogs, we rely on all the different animals within the ecosystem so that we have proper food grains, we have proper trees, the rain system. All of this is dependent or has interactive influences as part of the ecosystem. If I rupture or mess around with the ecosystem, who's to bear the brunt of it? And if I can't see it, then that's my unfortunate position. Correct? There's a story, simple story given in the Panchatantra to illustrate this point, that we do things against our own self-interest without knowing it. There was a woodcutter who was really dull-headed, not intelligent. He was sitting on a branch of a tree and cutting the very branch that he was sitting on. So a sage walked by, looked at him and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm cutting wood. I need to take wood, firewood, back home." So, but if the way you're cutting the branch, you're going to fall from the tree. So he asked him, "What, are you a fortune teller or what? You think you can look into the future? What makes you think you're such an intelligent person? I don't need to listen to you." Chop, 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 and bam, fell to the ground because he cut the branch he was sitting on. He went fell at the feet of this person and said, "Wow, you're Trikalagya, you can see the future." He said, "No, there's no special skill involved, there's just little common sense." What is such unique about common sense? That the people who need it most have the least. It's very uncommon. Although we call it common sense, it's very uncommon because our intelligence is covered. Something that the sages and Tattvadarshis can see so obviously, we're completely oblivious to it. So we are like that foolish woodcutter sitting on and cutting the very branch we're sitting on. So the Vedas, they say, "Tamasi ma jyotirgamaya." Please don't do it. You'll harm yourself. Prabhupada explained. I explained. We've heard this many times. I like it, so I repeat it. That there are very different levels of intelligence. The most intelligent person learns on the basis of hearing. They hear the truth and they accept the truth. The not so intelligent persons, they can't understand the truth by hearing. They have to see it. Only when they see the truth, they say, "Ah, I agree." Suppose you tell someone, "Don't put your hand in fire, it will burn." If they don't learn, they have to see someone burn. Oh. Even less intelligent than that, who doesn't learn from hearing and seeing, learns it from experience. Very good. This is where most of us operate on. Learning from experience. If I have not experienced it, the truth doesn't exist. We wait for experience to come. That's not the way to learn. Then there are the next class, who hear, who see, who have the experience, and yet do not learn. Because they think, "Oh, I think I did it the wrong way. If I did it the right way, I won't experience this." So they keep trying the right way. They keep adjusting. Anyone watch the movie Back to the Future? How many people saw the movie Back to the Future? I think of Kali Yuga persons like the professor who was trying this time machine. He tried again and again, it didn't work. And he was pretty frazzled. Yet he kept trying. Adjusting something here, tinkering with some other system here, some hydraulic something, electric something, trying to make it work. In Bhagavatam, it is called Punah Punah Charvita Charvanana. Chewing the chew again and again. Trying the same thing a little differently to see if it works. It doesn't work. So mercy comes from the very essence that we respect but we are living entities and we are parts of Krishna. Mamayevamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Krishna says that all living entities are fragmental parts of, eternal fragmental parts of me. Yet they are in this material world struggling with the mind and these five senses. Manasashtani indriyani prakritisthani karshati. Karshati means struggles for existence. So these living entities who are parts and parcels of Krishna, they inhabit the different species of life, 8,400,000 species. Jalaja navalakshani sthavara laksha vimshati. Jalaja means entities born in water, the aquatics, 900,000 species. Sthavara means immobile. Laksha vimshati. Vimshati means 20. This is 2 million species of plants. Kramayo rudra sankhya. Insects 1.1 million. Pashunam dashalakshara. Animals, there are a million. Pakshinam dasalakshara. 1 million birds, 3 million animals, and 400,000 species of human beings. Our biology class never gave us this classification, right? In fact, our biologists haven't been able to determine exactly how many species there are. We're still working on it. We're coming up with new ways of classification. And by the way, we'll never come to the same number as the Vedas because we don't know how to classify things. Yet the Vedas give very specific number. Prabhupada says 400,000 species of human beings. It doesn't say 400,010. It doesn't say 385,000. 400,000 species of human beings. Very precise because it is coming from the absolute truth. So every living entity, regardless of what species it inhabits, is a part and parcel of Krishna, God. And to honor that is part of being merciful. Now, we may have the best of intentions, but there are so many living entities that we trample over without even knowing. We walk on the street and we may trample over ants. We turn the cooking range on and we kill a bunch of living entities. We boil water and a bunch of bacteria dies. We breathe and bacteria dies. So how do we live? So the Bhagavatam doesn't say become paranoid. Oh, then we cannot live a life of paranoia because one living entity depends on another living entity. But it says, as far as possible, be so responsible that just for the sake of your sense gratification, do not take away the right of another living entity to fully express its nature as a living being. So one of the principles is no meat eating, because the idea of meat eating violates directly the principle of mercy. Because when we have to, or whoever eats flesh of another animal, that animal has to die. You cannot say to the cow or chicken, don't worry, I won't kill you, I just take your leg. It doesn't work like that. So it is described that we have to eat something. We cannot live without eating. But our eating should be such that it causes the least damage to nature. So it is generally prescribed that you eat a vegetarian diet because that's the least, harmful, if you will. To explain that, first look at a few things about meat eating. We're going to look at least 3 perspectives or 3 aspects of it. First, from a heart health perspective. I'm going to read something and then you will explain. A comparative study of diet and heart disease in 7 countries showed that the death rate from coronary heart disease was highest in countries where the most animal products were consumed. The Finns, who consumed the most, had the highest death rate from heart disease. Americans were next, except for Seventh-day Adventists, most of whom eat no meat or poultry. They suffer only from half as much heart disease as other Americans. In Japan, where very little animal fat is eaten, there are fewer deaths from heart disease than in any other industrialized nation. It doesn't mean that Japanese don't eat meat, that's not the point. It's talking of a very specific connection between meat eating and heart disease. Scientists at the University of Milan found in one study that on diets equally low in fat and cholesterol, persons eating animal protein had higher levels of cholesterol in their blood than those fed a diet containing primarily vegetable protein. Further, recent research indicates that certain types of fiber found in plant foods can actually help lower blood cholesterol. High cholesterol leads to a condition known as arteriosclerosis, which in turn causes heart attacks, strokes, and high blood pressure. Thus, the Journal of American Medical Association reported in 1961 that a vegetarian diet can prevent 90 to 97% of heart diseases. Second, to reduce the risk of cancer. Research over the last 20 years suggests that the same kind of high animal fat and cholesterol diet that may set the stage for heart disease can also contribute to the growth of cancers of the colon, breast, and uterus. Among Seventh-day Adventists, Japanese, and East Indians, who generally eat very little meat, these cancers are relatively uncommon, but they are leading types of cancer among meat-eating Americans. In a study at the State University of New York at Buffalo, Professor Saxon Graham, chairman of the Department of Social and Preventive Medicine, found that people who regularly consumed large amounts of vegetables, especially in the cabbage family, had lower than expected rates of colon and rectal cancer. A chemical in these vegetables is known to block the action of certain carcinogens, cancer-causing substances. So here's a question. Why do meat eaters get more cancer? First of all, the meat people generally consume is aged to increase flavor. When an animal is slaughtered, its flesh immediately begins to putrefy, and after several days, it turns a sticky grey-green. The meat industry masks this discoloration by adding nitrites and other preservatives. These substances make the meat appear red, but in recent years, many of them have repeatedly been shown to be carcinogenic. Said Dr. William Leginski, a cancer researcher at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, I wouldn't even feed nitrate-laden foods to my cat. And the third is to help feed the world's starving people. A Harvard nutritionist, Jean Mary, estimates that reducing meat production by just 10% would release enough grain to feed if you reduce meat consumption by 10% in the world, how many people can it feed? Take a guess.
100%.
100%. You're talking number of people. 1 billion. That's a good guess. If you reduce meat consumption by 10% overall. 1 million? It's somewhere between 1 million and 1 billion. So 60 million. 60 million people can be fed with a 10% reduction in meat consumption. And I'll tell you why, because it's coming up. United Nations Secretary General Kurt Waldheim recently admitted that meat consumption in the rich countries is the key cause for hunger around the world. How is this? Many agricultural experts and economists feel that one of the chief factors that impairs the achievement of an adequate world food supply is the gross inefficiency in land use entailed by a diet centering on meat. Because it's all about efficiency in how you use land. And for meat production, the land is most inefficiently used. All livestock animals obtain their primary nutrient from plants, thus drawing heavily on those sources of vegetable protein that are later converted into animal products such as meat and eggs. Thus, meat eating is most uneconomical and impractical. If a man were to consume the vegetable foods directly, starvation and its corollary horrors would be wiped off the face of the earth. This is no exaggeration. Okay, here's some statistics for those people who are interested. If we exclude dairy cows, this is talking about what's called a conversion ratio. Conversion ratio means for how many pounds of grain. Conversion ratio means for how many pounds of grain do you get pounds of animal meat? No, let's read. I think it's less than that. If we exclude dairy cows, the average conversion ratio for US livestock is 7 pounds of grain and soy fed to produce 1 pound of edible meat. According to this estimate, of the 140 million tons of grain and soy we feed to our beef cattle, poultry, and hogs, 1/7 or only 20 million tons was returned to us in meat. Highly inefficient. The rest, almost 118 million tons of grain and soy, became inaccessible for human consumption. So here's some, many of us, when we discuss with people about I guess, the social, the economic, moral, etc. Reasons for avoiding or abstaining from meat, it's good to have certain statistics just so that there is some discussion and it's not just, it's some religious sentimentalism. We would like to talk something that's practical. So here are some statistics for practicality. Let's take 1,000 acres of land. Okay? In 1,000 acres of land, if I were to plant soybeans, I would get a yield of 1,124 pounds of usable protein. In the same 1,000 acres, if I were to grow rice, I get 938 pounds of usable protein. In the same 1,000 acres of land, if I were to grow corn, I would get about 1,000, just over 1,000 pounds of usable protein. And if I use that 1,000 acres to grow wheat, I would get 1,043 pounds of usable protein. And 1,000 acres of soy, corn, rice, or wheat, when fed to a steer, means an animal, usually cow, will yield how many pounds of usable protein? Huh? 125 pounds of usable protein. That's it. So it's less than a tenth. So land, which by the way on this planet, 2/3 is water, 1/3 is land, and of that 1/3, about 70% is single family homes. Meaning we're moving from agriculture to making houses. So our available agricultural land is reducing. To add to it, or to make the problem worse, to exacerbate it, we're using very inefficient food production methods. Food production method means we're taking what grows from land, feed it to the animals, kill the animals and eat them. So what we get from 1,000 acres of land, instead of 1,000 pounds of protein, is 125 pounds of protein. With 6+ billion people on the planet and growing very fast, thanks to India and China, growing very fast, actually, we're going to be falling short of food. Even then, Earth produces